Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Kami and Shinigami make Naruto Sage of 6 Paths. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by MRBLACKY 1985 and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 1 I've had enough. The Afterlife. There was a wide open space, all around was just white, but in the center was a large desk, filled with large towers of paperwork. All around this desk were also countless towers of paperwork. Sitting at this desk was a woman, beautiful beyond belief. She had long dark hair that reached down to the middle of her back, she had fair skin that was almost white. Her eyes were golden without pupils, but silver ripples with 8 tomos in each eye, each represented a different element, earth, fire, water, wind, lightning, yin, yang, and omni. She had a cute little nose, small rosy lips, and hergless figure with large breasts, only tsunades could rival them in size. She wore a white kimono with a red sash and a necklace with red beads, and 8 tomos in between. This woman was Kami, and she had a really bad and stressful day. Her head was lying on her desk while she held a pen in her right hand which was currently signing another document. Oh, how she wished to just burn all this paperwork, but no matter what, it just seemed that there was no end to this evil monster. Every time she looked up there was more as if it could reproduce itself. Out of nowhere, there was a sudden plop and the Shinigami was suddenly before her. He had long, spiky, white hair, 2 red horns, purple skin and wore a white robe. In his hands, he holds a large stack of papers and with a scowl, he placed them on the desk in front of Kami. This is the 15th time this month alone that I had to send him back, 15 times. He is just a 7-year-old child for fuck's sake. Shinigami stated angrily. Kami raised her head and looked at him with her own scowl, and what am I supposed to do? I'm stuck here with all this shit. I can't just go down there, lay waste to everything and come back as if nothing happened, do you know how much paperwork that would create? Shinigami sighed, he knew they couldn't just simply go down there and do whatever they want. I know, but there has to be something that we can do, he said tiredly. Kami was seething with anger, she put enough pressure on her pen to break it, and the more she heard the more of her anger flared off her. In the end, the amount of anger she radiated incinerated all the paperwork that was around them. That's it, I've had enough. Damn all the paperwork, Kami said in a deathly low tone. I'm going down there and I'm going to make sure that some like that never happens again. I don't care if anybody has something to say about that, I'm Kami for fuck's sake and everyone else can shut the fuck up. Before Shinigami could say anything she vanished in a swirl of golden flames. Damn, Kami-chan is really sexy when she's angry, scary but sexy, Shinigami said to himself. Konoha Hospital. It was late afternoon when Kami appeared in a swirl of golden fire in the patient room of Uzumaki Naruto. She looked at the completely bandaged form of the little boy and a tear began to roll down her cheek. She walked over to his bed and put her right hand on his head, a moment later she instantly knew how injured he still was. Her hand glowed for a few seconds, then Naruto began also to glow, and seconds later the glow vanished and all his physical injuries were healed. You poor boy, I will make sure this won't happen again, she thought. She stood there for a few minutes until suddenly the door to the room opened and closed again just as fast. In came a little girl with dark blue hair, pupilless lavender-colored eyes that were reddened from crying, she also had bruises on her arms, which were showing since she was wearing only her training gear without her bulky jacket. She also had a black eye and bandages around her forehead. But the tears in her eyes, she didn't notice the woman in the room and rushed over to Naruto's bed. She broke down when she saw all the bandages wrapped around him, grabbing his hand her head down, she sobbed. Naruto-kun, how could this happen, why do they always beat you up, you don't deserve this. You are the nicest, bravest, and strongest person I know. Ever since you saved me from those bullies years ago I admired you, I always wanted to tell you that, but I was always too shy. I wish I was as brave as you are, tell you how much you mean to me, how I feel about you, how much I love you, she said sobbing. Kami couldn't help it, but awed at what the little girl said, gaining the girl's attention, she was glad that Naruto had someone who would love him. When Hinata noticed the woman she immediately blushed a deep crimson red before she stammered, who are you? She noticed the woman chuckling and she saw how beautiful she was. I'm Kami, and who might you be? She asked with a smile. Hinata was shocked in front of her stood Kami herself, so it took her a moment before she answered, I'm Hyuga Hinata, Kami-sama. Nice to meet you Hinata-chan, she said with a warm smile. Tell me Hinata-chan, why are you here? Kami asked. Hinata looked down with tears in her eyes at Kami's question, in her haste to get to Naruto, she completely forgot why she wanted to get to him in the first place. They were friends for some time now, since the day he protected her from those bullies, she wanted to be his friend, and once the academy started they became friends. But now she remembered why she wanted to get to him. She wanted to tell him that her clan had branded her and was currently seeking a suitable buyer for her so they could make some money and gain more political allies. She ran from her home and wanted to say goodbye to him. Before she would allow herself to become some slave to some rich merchant or another old man, she would rather take her own life than have to live with someone else than him. I wanted to say goodbye to him. My clan branded me with the cage bird seal and is currently seeking a buyer for me. Before I have to live with some old man instead of the person I truly love, I would rather end my own life, Hinata told the goddess. Kami was more than furious when she heard that. She was absolutely livid. She was ready to vaporize the whole village. In front of her was this sweet innocent little girl that was about to commit suicide. She wasn't even 7 and she was so desperate because her own family that she was ready to commit suicide. What was wrong with this place that 2 innocent children were better off dead rather than living amongst the people of this village? She had to do something about this, she couldn't allow this to go on. So she did something that hadn't happened ever before. Don't worry child, I won't let anything happen to you or him anymore. You both will become my students and I will train you to become the most powerful shinobi this world has ever seen, far more powerful than even the Rikido Sennin was. Hinata couldn't believe what she just heard. Were they really becoming Kami students? As if Kami could read her mind, she smiled at her and nodded her head. But before Hinata could ask Kami anything else, the door to Naruto's room opened and 2 men entered the room. The first was an old man with white robes and a red hat. The second was a rather tall man in Anbu gear with an Inu mask and gravity-defying silver hair. As soon as the old man saw who else was in the room, he interrogated the one person he didn't know. Who are you and are you doing here? Kami was still angry about what happened to the 2 children and now there was this rude little man and demanded information from her. She fixed him with a glare and flared some killer intent. It wasn't much for her, but it was plenty for the 2 men. They were instantly floored and gasping for air. Who I am? She asked in a dangerously low tone. I am Kami and I'm extremely pissed because of the population of this village. First, they treat little Naruto-kun like he was less than dirt and when that didn't show the desired result they started to beat him up to an inch of his life. The latest of that was a torture session he only survived because Shinigami-kun healed his charred and disfigured remains enough that Kurama-kun could heal the rest of his body. He is currently still occupied with repairing his mind and suppressing the most gruesome parts of the torture. Sadly he can't suppress all of it without causing severe damage to his brain, the angry goddess roared. Her Kai lessened after her rant so the 2 men could breathe again and stand up. Hinata meanwhile was in tears. The 2 men were shocked from what they heard. Kami-sama, I'm the Hokage of this village, Sarutobi Hiruzen. I apologize about my rude attitude from before. I was just protective about Naruto-kun since I view him as a surrogate grandson and I didn't know who you were, the old man said while bowing to Kami. I was just notified that Naruto-kun was once again admitted to the hospital. I didn't know what happened to him. What do you mean by torture session and charred and disfigured remains? He asked fearfully. She glared at him once more before she looked at Hinata and put her to sleep with a quick hand movement. As Hinata was put to sleep and laid down beside Naruto on his bed, she proceeded to tell the Hokage what happened to him. After finishing, Hiruzen was white as a sheet of paper. His Anbu guard was already on the ground on all 4 and shedding tears. During the reporter emptied his stomach multiple times. How could this happen? Have they completely lost their minds? He asked in a quiet tone. That's the reason why I'm taking the 2 children with me. I won't let anything like this happening again, she said with anger in her voice. I completely agree with that, but what I don't understand is, why also Hinata-chan? The old man asked. She was branded by her own clan and is about to be sold. She was ready to commit suicide because of this, since that would have meant that she would have to live without the person she loves. So I'm taking her too, the goddess stated firmly without any room to argue. Hiruzen had no desire to argue with that. With everything that he heard today in this room, he was ready to level the village himself. Kami-sama, is there anything you need, anything I can help with? She thought about it a few moments before she said, get Naruto's inheritance ready, seal it all up and bring it to me. I will give it to him when we arrive where we will stay to train. Also, send for Jiraiya, he has the key to the seal which we will need. Hiruzen nodded and asked before he turned to leave, when will you go? As soon as possible, but at the end of the week at the latest, she replied. The old Hokage nodded one last time before he left to prepare everything. When he was done with all the preparations, he would tear this village a new one, starting with the civilian council, and Haruno Mibuyuki was the #1 name on his list. Kami decided to let Hinata sleep since it was already evening, and with everything that happened, she would need the rest. Unconsciously, Hinata turned in her sleep towards Naruto and snuggled up to him and had a small smile on her face. That smile grew when Naruto suddenly also turned in his comatose sleep and embraced her protectively, as if he knew of her situation and her sadness and was saying he would protect her, with him she would be safe. When the goddess saw that, she smiled warmly and her resolve was only hardened, she would protect them and would do everything within her power to make them strong. Starting with staying by their side until they were ready to get away from this hellhole of a village. Hokage Tower Council Chamber. 20 minutes after Hiruzen left the hospital, he was in the council chamber and before him was the entire council including his old advisors. "Why are we here, Hiruzen?" one of the civilian councillors asked arrogantly. The rest of the council soon found out that this was his last act of disrespect and arrogance since he now had a kunai embedded deeply in his forehead. They were all shocked by this and even more so by the fact that it was their Hokage who threw the kunai. "We are here because of the actions of some bigoted assholes of this village, some of them are even here in this room," he said in a dangerous tone. No one dared to say anything. A group of certain individuals tortured Uzumaki Naruto in some of the most brutal ways and proceeded to burn him alive and left him to die. When he said this he leaked massive amounts of kai that nearly suffocated the whole council. After he calmed down some, one civilian councillor seemed to have forgotten the earlier learned lesson and said, "Ha. So, we are finally rid of this demon." Once again, there was a body on the ground with a kunai in its forehead. Naruto is still alive and thanks to somebody else I have the names of every single one who is guilty of this despicable act. 3 of these individuals are currently in this room, 2 of them already dead, the third will wish she was after I'm done with her, he spoke with barely restrained anger. Uruno Mibuki, you are guilty of treason, assault, attempted murder, and a bunch of other crimes. Your sentence is a public execution, but before that, you will spend some time in the dungeons of INT. The whole council was silent, no one dared to object, they hadn't seen their Hokage act like this since the Second Great Ninja War and they were afraid of that. Mibuki was escorted out of the room by 2 Anbu agents and brought to INT. Now that this is done, the civilian council is hereby disbanded. It is clear that I was way too lenient with you, but this ends now. Also, the advisors are also sent into retirement, Hiruzen declared. Once again they were too shocked and afraid of him to say anything. This meeting is adjourned. And with that everyone left as quickly as possible, no one wanted to draw his anger towards them and end like one of the civilian councillors. Konoha Hospital. The next morning was relatively quiet if you ignored the protests outside the hospital where a large group of civilians demanded that the demon child be executed immediately to finish what the Yondames started. These protests woke up one certain blonde boy. When he slowly opened his eyes he only bleary forms. One of these forms was dark blue and laying on his chest. He noticed that this form had arms, which were slung around him and meant that this had to be a person. He also noticed that he had his own arm slung around this person. His vision started to clear and he realized just who he was cuddling with, his best and only friend Hyuga Hinata, which made him blush deeply. A warm feeling started to rise in his stomach that started to tingle lightly, but he didn't feel sick, quite the opposite, it felt really good. He was confused by this feeling since he didn't know what it meant, the only thing he knew at this moment was that he liked this feeling and that Hinata was really pretty. It was only now that he noticed that the noise that woke him up was gone. He looked around the room he was in and instantly knew where he was. How could he not recognize a hospital room when he practically lived inside the hospital for the last few years? He spent more time inside the hospital as a patient than the Hokage working on the dreaded paperwork. He was surprised when he saw someone else in the room. This person was neither a doctor, nurse, Anbu nor the Hokage. It was a beautiful woman with strange but beautiful eyes and a kind smile. Despite the kind smile, he was apprehensive, so he unconsciously tightened his grip around Hinata, which made her stir a little, but didn't wake her up. The woman noticed that and her smile saddened, but she understood why he reacted that way. She was a stranger to him and all he ever got from strangers, except a select few, was pain, suffering, and misery. "Don't worry Naruto-kun, I won't hurt you or Hinata-chan. In fact, I'm here to make sure that no one hurts you or her ever again," she said with a kind voice that instantly soothed his worries. He softened his grip around Hinata but didn't let go of her. "Who are you and how do you know our names?" he asked curiously but still wary. Kami was glad that he still remained curious about his surrounding despite all he suffered and smiled warmly at him as she answered, "I'm Kami and I know quite a lot about you and your lives. The recent events however made it clear that I can't let you live here on your own anymore, not with those people out there. You have already suffered more than most shinobi would in their entire life and you are only a child. I couldn't bear it anymore, I had to do something. So, I decided that I will take you 2 away from here and train you as my students. You will learn as much as possible and grow strong enough to protect each other and everyone or thing that is precious to you." Naruto was speechless, in front of him was Kami-sama herself. Not only that, she said she would take them away from here to train them so he would be strong enough to protect Hinata-chan. If that was a dream he didn't want to wake up. But on the other side, it would mean that he wouldn't be able to see Hokage Jiji, Iruka-sensei, Tuchi Oji, Aim Nichan, Kat Nichan, and Inu Nyasan for a very long time. At least Hinata-chan would be with him and he wouldn't have to run for his life from those villagers anymore. He looked at her and gave her a true smile and said, "Okay Kami-sama, when do we leave?" She looked at him surprised but then chuckled before she replied, "Soon, but we have to wait for a little to get everything that we will need for your training." Just a few hours later, Hinata woke up with a giant blush just to faint instantly when she realized in what kind of position she woke up. A little while later she woke up again and this time managed to stay awake, albeit barely, so the three inside the room could discuss the situation. Sometime later the Hokage came into Naruto's room and with him came Kat, Inu, and a tall man with long white hair and red markings in his face. He wore an olive green battle kimono with mesh armor underneath it and a red sleeveless coat above it and wooden sandals. He also wore a horned hit-I-8 with a kanji for oil and a large scroll on his back. This man was Jiraiya, the Toad Sage, and he looked mighty pissed. The four people bowed to Kami before Hiruzen spoke, "Kami-sama, I've got everything that you requested, Jiraiya reverse summoned back here to get here as quick as possible." "Good, we will need the key, without it, it would be nearly impossible to safely open up the cage and get Kurama-kun's help," said the goddess. Jiraiya only nodded, he wasn't exactly thrilled to open up the cage, but who was he to argue with Kami-sama? So he summoned Giratora and told Naruto to open his mouth as wide as possible. Naruto was reluctant at first, but at the nod of Kami, he opened his mouth and the toad jumped in, trying to get in as deep as possible, while Naruto was nearly suffocating until Jiraiya helped in shoving him completely down his throat. Somewhere in the land of rice. Achu, a certain snake-loving Sannin sneezed. "Back in Konoha. That was disgusting and I nearly suffocated," complained Naruto. "Now that that's done we've got everything we need. Hiruzen, you should bring your village in order, if you don't it's highly possible that Konoha won't survive their return, if they ever desire to do so that is," said Kami in a serious tone. The old Hokage looked saddened but knew she was right and simply nodded. "I take it that you will leave in the next few hours at the most?" he asked. "Actually, we will leave in the next few minutes, we will only stop by Naruto-kun's apartment to get some clothes and then we will leave the village," said Kami. Once again the old Hokage nodded and walked over to Naruto and Hinata, he hugged them both and with a grandfatherly smile, wished them good luck and said goodbye to them. Pat and Inu also walked over to them, hugged them and said their goodbyes. Jiraiya remained where he was standing and smiled sadly, he won't see his godchild for a very long time and wouldn't be able to get any info about how he will be. Minutes later, true to her word, they only stopped by Naruto's apartment to get him some clothes and then quickly left the village. Once outside of sight of the village entrance, Kami stopped and told the two children to hold her hands. They did that and moments later they were gone from where they once stood. In the shadows of the trees flanking the path, there were a dozen rude Anbu, all of them surprised by the sudden disappearance of their target. Danzo wouldn't be happy that their mission failed, and they now don't know where they will be and won't be able to acquire the Jinchuriki and the little Hyuga. The ruins of Yuzashigakure. Mere moments after they vanished from the path in the forest they reappeared in the middle of a large plaza, or what remained of it. In front of them was a large building that seemed to be the only structure that was still in one piece. All the other buildings around them were only ruins, burned down, collapsed or about to collapse, if you were so much as to sneeze at it. "Where are we?" asked Naruto when he looked around him, he had this strange feeling in his gut, he didn't know why, but he felt like he was back home. But that couldn't be, could it? He never before left Konoha, and this place was definitely nowhere in Konoha. "We are in Yuzashigakure, Naruto-kun. This once was the village where your clan was at home. We will stay here since this could be considered the safest place, especially for you," said Kami as she looked at the blonde boy. Naruto looked shocked at Kami and asked, "I had a clan. Who were they, what were they like and why are they gone?" Kami looked a little sad when she remembered what exactly happened here, but Naruto had the right to know what happened and so she told them. They were the Uzumaki clan and they were one of the most powerful clans to ever exist. Equally as famous as feared for their knowledge and skill in Fuinjutsu and Kinjutsu. They had longevity without power and chakra reserves that could easily rival that of a Biju, even their weakest chunins. They were easily recognizable by their red hair and their temper, especially if you insulted them. But one of their most important traits was their love for their family, they would do anything to protect their family, even if it meant facing of a god. They were so strong that it took 3 of the major villages, Kumo, Iwa, Kiri, and a handful of smaller villages to beat them. 50.000 Kumo nins, 30.000 Iwa nins, 20.000 Kiri nins, and around another 20.000 nins from all the smaller villages together against 5.000 Yuzu nins. Despite being so extremely outnumbered and having lost, they took nearly 90% of their enemies with them. The Sandaime Reikage and the Sandaime Mizukage were also among the dead, along with 4 of the 6 Jinchuriki they brought with them. This battle was the start of the Second Great Ninja War, and only due to this one battle and the massive losses of the three major villages was Konoha able to win this war in the end. Naruto and Hinata were awed by this little history lesson about the Uzumaki clan, but they were also sad that they were gone. "Does that mean that there are no Uzumaki left beside me?" asked Naruto looking down. "There are some survivors, but they aren't many, only very few survived and had some children. Chances are that the children of these survivors don't even know that they are Uzumaki or that they had a clan," answered Kami. "But that's something for another time. For now, we should get inside the Uzukage Tower and look around for things we can use during our stay here. There should be some rooms still functional that we can use, and maybe we can find you some clothes and gear," she said, turning around and leading the two children towards the only intact building. Once inside, they looked around and found several rooms that would later come in handy, such as a large underground training area, a kitchen, the armory, a cantina, 2 rooms with beds, tables, chairs, couches, dressers, and bathrooms. They also found the infirmary, some storage rooms, and the cage office. "Alright, you two take this room and I take the other one. Next, we should take inventory about what's left inside the armory, infirmary, the kitchen and in the storage rooms. Maybe we can find something useful," said Kami, and the two children nodded. It took quite some time to look through everything. Luckily for them, they found plenty of food sealed up in special stasis storage scrolls in a storage room connected to the kitchen. In the armory were a few sets of armor left, and thanks to the ingenuity of the Uzumaki seal masters, they had a plethora of seals on them, and one of them allowed the armor to automatically refit itself to the wearer's physique. There were also a few hundred shuriken, kunai, rolls of ninja wire, storage scrolls, even a few dozen swords of different kinds, from katana to ninjato to tanto, and almost everything in between. When they were done, they met up in the cage office. "Wow, I had no idea that there was so much cool stuff still around here," said a starstruck but tired Naruto. There were SSOM many D different K kinds of verbs, and T these S seals and T the I infirmary, stuttered Hinata, who was similarly starstruck. Kami chuckled a bit at their reactions and said, "Calm down, Hinata-chan, take a deep breath before you speak, that helps with the stutter. I also found another room that would most definitely be helpful to you too. Naruto-kun, come over here and prick your finger to drop a bit of blood on this seal here, that will unseal the library that's behind this wall over there." Naruto did like Kami told him, and as soon as his blood dropped onto the seal, a red light appeared on the indicated wall for a few seconds and then vanished just as quick as it appeared. It revealed a door that led to another room that was bigger on the inside than on the outside. "Wow, how is that possible?" asked Naruto. "Quite simple actually, the whole library is sealed inside another dimension, and this door is the only access point to this dimension. This dimension shrinks or enlarges just as needed, so you have an infinite amount of space to store all this knowledge. Your ancestors were really something else to come up with something like this, and then also being able to actually create it," said the goddess with a praising nod and smile. Since it was already evening, they decided to eat dinner and discuss what the training regime would be. For both of them, it would start with warm-ups and stretches, followed by stamina and strength exercises, then chakra control and taijutsu. All that would be the morning training every day. On weekdays, Naruto would train Kenjutsu, Fuinjutsu, and Ninjutsu in the afternoon. Hinata would also train Kenjutsu, then Ryujutsu, and Jinjutsu. On the weekend, their afternoon training was purely academics. Now there was only one thing left, telling Naruto who his parents were. "Naruto-kun, you now know that you are part of the Uzumaki clan. I will now tell you who your parents are and what status you have through this." Kami looked at him and saw anticipation and hope in his eyes. He would finally learn who his parents are. "Your mother is Namikaze Uzumaki Kushina, also known as the Red Hot-Blooded Habanero or Red Death. She was the daughter of the last Uzukage, which also made her the daimyo of the Land of Whirlpools, which means that you as her heir are now daimyo of said nation." She let that sink in for a few moments before she continued. "Your father is Namikaze Minato, also known as Yondaime Hokage or Yellow Flash of Konoha. That all makes you essentially a prince in more than one way to Konoha," she concluded. Naruto was completely shocked. He was the son of the Yondaime and also daimyo to a nation. Hinata saw that and acted purely on instinct. She hugged him. It was the only thing she could do to support him at this moment. But there was one question that remained inside his head. "Kami-sama, my parents, did they love me?" He asked hopefully. This was more important than any title or jutsu or even raiment to him. Of course they did. Naruto-kun, when Kushina-chan told Minato-kun that she was pregnant, the first thing he did was bounce around like a rubber ball, yelling happy that he was going to be a father. "They loved you more than you could ever imagine. They couldn't wait for you to finally be born. But the day you were born something happened that wasn't supposed to happen," she said sadly. Naruto knew what happened, the Kyuubi attack, the day his parents died. Kami decided he should know the real reason behind the attack and about his other status. Naruto-kun, there is more to that day than you or anybody else knows, and I will explain it to you too, but first, do you know what a Jinchuriki is? She asked and both shook their heads no. A Jinchuriki is a person who has one of the 9 Bijuu sealed inside of them. You Naruto-kun, like your mother before you and Senju Uzumaki Mito before here, are one. You are the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi. This shocked both Naruto and Hinata, but before either one could say something she continued. This doesn't mean that you are the Kyuubi, you are like a storage scroll that contains a kunai, you are only the vessel, not what seals inside. The two children relaxed visibly, but Hinata only hugged Naruto even more after what she just learned. Naruto-kun, that means you are a hero, even more than you were already to me. She said with tears in her eyes. Naruto and Kami both noticed what she said and that she said it without a stutter. Soon Hinata also noticed what she said and went beet red and fainted in Naruto's arms, which made Naruto panic lightly that she fainted and Kami chuckle. A few moments later Hinata woke up again, still in Naruto's embrace. He wouldn't let go of her, he had this feeling that he had to protect her, and so he kept her close to him. Kami saw this and chuckled again with a knowing smile. Alright, now let's continue. The real reason why Kyuubi attacked was because he was forced to do so. Your mother had just given birth to you, which meant that the seal containing him was at its weakest. At this moment a masked man appeared and killed the guards and the Sandame's wife who was the midwife. He held you hostage to blackmail and distract your father so he could rip Kyuubi out of Kushina-chan. After he ripped him out, he placed him under a powerful genjutsu and ordered him to attack the village. Minato-kun was meanwhile engaging to masked man and managed to wound him and lift his control over Kyuubi. But Kyuubi was still too enraged and the only way to stop a Bijuu is to seal them since you can't kill a being that is essentially pure chakra. Your father couldn't ask any other family to sacrifice their child if he wasn't ready to do so himself, so he sealed Kyuubi inside you. Kyuubi, still blinded by his rage, tried to attack you, but your parents stopped his claw with their body and by doing so saving you, she explained. Naruto was going through all kinds of emotions, but in the end, he said something that surprised everyone. It wasn't Kyuubi's fault that my parents died, they would have died either way. It's that masked man's fault that they and so many others died. I can't fault him for trying to attack me either, he was still in too much rage and pain, and I'm sure everyone else would have done the same thing. Just think about it, one moment you were sealed up, then you get forcefully ripped out and forced into a genjutsu, and then forced to attack something. As soon as you are free from that genjutsu you are about to get sealed away again and robbed of your newfound freedom. Everyone would have tried to prevent that from happening, so it truly wasn't Kyuubi's fault. Inside of Naruto's mindscape, a certain fox was more than surprised by what his host just said. He had forgiven him for killing his parents. He had tears in his eyes. All these years he tried to help the kid repent for his crime of killing his parents, and here he was forgiven by the young kid. Ami also had tears in her eyes. This child truly was something special. Despite everything he had to endure, he still had such a big heart. She came around the table at which they sat and embraced him in a hug. You truly are something special, Naruto-kun, please keep this big heart of yours safe, she said and gave him a motherly kiss on the forehead. Naruto, on the other hand, blushed deeply from this kind of affection, but what Hinata did topped everything. She kissed him on the cheek and said that he was the kindest person in the world, that in turn made him faint. Kami and Hinata couldn't help but laugh at that. After all that, it was time to go to bed. Only problem was, there was only one bed in their room. Naruto said he would take the couch, but Hinata shook her head with a blush that nearly invented a new shade of red and said that she wouldn't mind sharing the bed since it was large enough for 2 persons. In the dresser, they found some clothing that was clearly too large for them, but as sleeping clothes, it would do. After they changed clothes, Hinata in the bathroom, they brushed their teeth and went to bed. They were both tired from the long day, and Naruto quickly fell asleep. Hinata, in a moment of braveness, snuggled up to Naruto, and to her surprise, he embraced her in his sleep. She too quickly fell asleep in his arms with her head resting on his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. Konoha Hokage Tower. Hiruzen was once again facing off the most dreaded, most heinous, most hated of all his foes, paperwork. Oh, how he just would have liked to incinerate this bane of his existence. But fate seemed to have mercy with him and sent him a little break in the form of a knocking on his office door. Years of gruesome shinobi training prevented him from crying, kissing the feet of his visitor, and thanking him for this break. Instead, he just gave his approval for whoever was on the other side of the door to enter his office. To his surprise, it was none other than Hyuga Hiashi who entered, and his appearance was something he had never seen on the normally stoic Hyuga patriarch. Hiashi had blood on his clothing, but it didn't appear to be his own blood. His eyes were bloodshot, he had clear tear stains on his face, his hair was disheveled, and his face showed a multitude of emotions. The most prominent were fear, anger, sorrow, disgust, and shock. He quickly bowed and said with a hoarse voice, "Hokage-sama, my daughter Hinata, she was branded by the elders without my consent behind my back. They are also trying to sell her to the highest bidder. I killed my father who was the one who put that cursed seal on her. But ever since the branding she is missing and I can't find her. I searched everywhere, but I fear that she might have left the village or maybe have done something even more drastic." Hiruzen saw the pain Hiashi was in and how much he truly cared for his daughter, how he feared for her well-being. "Hiashi, calm down, everything is okay. I already know of the branding, although I must say that I never liked that seal, it divided your clan. But you can rest assured that your daughter is safe. She is with someone who will protect her and teach her, although I don't know the location where they currently are, I believe that this is for the best, the fewer people who know where they are the safer they are. All I can say is, Hinata-chan and Naruto-kun are protected by someone that not even the most powerful S-rank shinobi could hope to defeat." Hiashi was visibly calming down as he heard that his daughter was safe. But he still wanted to know who exactly was the one to protect his daughter. "Hokage-sama, please, who is this person who is protecting and teaching her?" The old Hokage smirked lightly before he said, "Let's just say, it was divine intervention." At first, Hiashi frowned at that cryptic answer, but when he thought about what he was told before, that not even the strongest S-rank shinobi could defeat that person, and that it was divine intervention, he went wide-eyed. "You don't mean, do you?" he asked. Hiruzen chuckled at that and said, "If anybody were stupid enough to try anything, they would get blown into oblivion." Ruins of Yuzushio. It was 5 a.m. the next morning, and Kami decided that was the perfect time to wake her two students up. She opened the door to their room and saw the two cuddling and still sleeping with Hinata's head on Naruto's chest, and both had a content smile on their lips. So she quickly grabbed a camera out of thin air and shot a photo. "They are so cute together," she thought with a huge smile. A moment later she woke them up and told them to get dressed and come get breakfast. The two were still too sleepy to realize in what kind of position they woke up and just got dressed, still too sleepy to realize that they changed in the same room. After getting ready for the day they went to the cantina to get breakfast. Once there they met up with Kami and ate. "Okay you two, before we begin with your training, there is something that needs to be done," Kami said and got over to Hinata. She took off her bandages that were still wrapped around her head and showed the caged bird seal underneath. Hinata was instantly reminded of what had happened and was about to tear up at the memory when Kami put her right hand on her forehead. Her hand started to glow for a few seconds and when the glow receded, Hinata felt a warmth come over her. The seal started to fade away until it was completely gone. "Wow, that seal on your head is gone Hinata-chan," Naruto exclaimed astounded. Hinata touched her head and couldn't believe it, she quickly grabbed a metal tray and looked at her reflection. The seal was gone, not a single trace of it was left. She began to tear up and quickly hugged Kami. "Thank you Kami-sama, thank you so much," she cried. Kami smiled at her and hugged her back, "Of course Hinata-chan, I couldn't let you run around with this abomination on your forehead." After breakfast, they headed to the underground training field where they would start their training. "Oh, before I forget, there is something else, a little surprise for you too. I decided that you could use more than just one sensei, so I convinced Shinigami-kun to let a few certain people come back, so if you would be so kind." Kami said with a smile. Moments later 4 beams of light appeared and out of these beams of light came 4 people. Chapter 2 Time flies by. The moment the light receded, Naruto and Hinata had many different thoughts racing through their minds. They stared wide-eyed at the 4 people before them and a second later Hinata fainted from the shock. Naruto quickly caught her and was panicking that she might have died, this resulted in a hearty laugh from the 4 people and Kami. A few minutes later Hinata regained consciousness and said, "I just had the weirdest dream. I dreamed that my mom and uncle came back from the dead." She blinked a few times and looked around. She could feel that Naruto was holding her in a tight embrace, as if she would vanish in thin air if he let go of her. It made her blush and feel perfectly safe as if nothing could do her any harm as long as he held her in his arms and thus she snuggled even closer to him. Not only Naruto noticed that, but all the others who were there did also, resulting in a blushing Naruto and chuckling adults and deity. "Hinata-chan, that wasn't a dream, they are back from the dead and my parents are also back," told her Naruto with a huge smile. Hinata's eyes went wide once again and when she spotted her mother she couldn't hold back her tears. Naruto let her go and she bolted over to her mother, embracing her in a giant hug and crying, "Mom, you're back, I missed you so much." "I missed you too Hinata-chan," said her mother with tears in her eyes, while also hugging her. The two were hugging each other for a few minutes before they separated again, and Kami told them that they were the people who were going to help train them. She also told them that their parents would stay alive even after their training was done, since they already had endured enough misery in their young lives and deserved at least a loving family. Of course, everyone present was more than happy to hear that. And so began their training and new life with their family. although loving parents and uncle, when it came to their training they were sadistic slave drivers, especially Kushina and Hitomi, who had the tendency to almost killing their children more than often during kinjutsu or survival training. Despite getting almost killed every other day by their mothers, they loved them and wouldn't trade them for the world. Naruto and Hinata grew even closer during their training and off time, which didn't go unnoticed by the adults. One day, about half a year after they started the training, Hitomi and Kushina decided to tell their children about something that they had planned before they were born. "Naruto-kun, Hina-chan, come over for a moment, we need to tell you two something," said Kushina as she beckoned them over to sit on a couch in the newly refurbished common room. The two got over and comfy on the couch. Hinata had long ago decided that Naruto was her favorite cushion, so she sat in his lap with her head resting on his shoulder while he was holding her with his arms around her waist. "We are really glad that the two of you are getting along so well with each other, especially since this makes this way easier," Hitomi said with a warm smile. The two were curious what this was all about and were signaling their mothers to go on. "You see, Hitomi and I were always best friends since our days at the academy, and after we both got married to our husbands and after getting pregnant, we decided to bring our families together by agreeing on an arranged marriage between our children if they were a boy and girl each, or being the godparents to each other's children if they were both the same sex. Since you are a boy and a girl, the former agreement takes place, so you two are betrothed to each other. We will, of course, respect your decision if you don't want to," told them Kushina. Naruto and Hinata were of course more than just surprised by this, they were best friends and both had over time realized that they had feelings for each other, they just didn't know about the other's feelings for them and didn't want to risk their friendship if the other didn't feel the same way. But now there was an opportunity, they looked at each other in the eyes and saw first hope, then realization, and finally happiness. They turned back to their mothers and said in sync, "We definitely want to be together forever." Both mothers were happy to hear that, both for their children and that their families would grow together as they hoped. There was, of course, also a different occasion where all four adults were ready to march for Konoha and level the village to the ground for what they did to Naruto and the Hyuga clan to Hinata. This was averted by Kami when she told them that they would get their revenge in a different form, namely by training the children, and once they were ready come back with them. Time went by, 2 years to be exact, and Naruto and Hinata both made enormous progress. Under the tutelage of their senseis, they learned everything they would have learned during their academy time in the first year. The next 1.5 years were spent on focusing more on their ninja talents. They were both adept in the Yuzu Kenjutsu and Fuinjutsu styles. Hinata made leaps in her gentle fist style once they found out that her elemental affinity was not earth like it was common for most Hyugas, but that she had a very strong water affinity, strong lightning as a secondary and wind as a third. Once they knew that, they worked on a brand new style for her. With Kushina's help they incorporated some parts of the Uzumaki Taijutsu style. They named her new style Gentle Maelstrom, which was a very accurate description. From afar it looked very gentle and more like a dance, but if you were her opponent, it felt more like you were hit by a maelstrom. Naruto learned his mother's Yuzu style and his father's Hummingbird style and combined them to a very deadly and absolutely unpredictable style. They learned about first aid and basic medic jutsus, and during this, they also had to learn about the human anatomy and the specific differences between male and female. This resulted in a quite amusing sex education class for the adults, not so much for the children. They both were blushing and discovering new shades of red with each passing new information, and Hinata was fainting every so often, resulting in laughter from the adults. In the end, they were too shy to look at each other for the rest of the week. Kushina decided that she would have none of that anymore after the 4th day and just simply stripped them both down and forced them to look at each other and bath together, saying that they would have to get over their shyness and get used to each other's naked bodies, and she would have them spar each other naked if they wouldn't get over it quickly enough. That apparently did the trick and they forced themselves to look at each other and get accustomed to each other's naked body. It took Hinata surprisingly only 2 times fainting before she could look at Naruto. Both were secretly happy that this happened, they were both curious about each other's bodies, but they could never admit that without the fear of the other thinking they were a pervert. Hinata was meanwhile surprised by the size of Naruto. She had seen both her father and her cousin Neji, but both were smaller despite being older, and Naruto was still growing. She marveled how big one could get and if it would ever fit. After all, it had to go inside her one day so they could make a baby. After they learned everything they could about medical jutsus and first aid from their senseis, they learned elemental jutsus. This was the time where Naruto learned about his affinities. He had an extreme wind main affinity, strong water as a second and lightning as a third. They also trained every day their chakra control, beginning with tree walking, water walking, walking up a waterfall, until they were ready for the colored sand exercise where they had 5 different colors of sand in each hand mixed together, and the goal was to separate the different colors from another towards their fingers, and once they managed that the next step would be to do that in under 10 seconds where it would be considered absolute perfect chakra control. Currently, they were still on the waterfall exercise where they combined their chakra control exercise with their normal physical exercises. For that, they were wearing gravity seals and movement restriction seals. They both learned the shadow clone to help them with training. Hinata was able to make up to 15 clones without being too exhausted to train. This was thanks to a chakra exercise that Kami showed them where Naruto would pump his chakra very carefully through her system to enlarge her chakra coils so they could store more chakra. Naruto was able to make several hundred clones at a time, which was necessary to help him with his chakra control. Since he had extremely large reserves, his control needed more work. During these 2.5 years Naruto made contact with Kurama, they talked a lot and Kurama apologized for what he did, but Naruto told him just like he told Kami and Hinata that it wasn't his fault. They quickly became friends and Kurama helped him where he could with his training, which also consisted of controlling Kurama's chakra. All in all, they were already way stronger than your average genin and nearing chunin in strength and skill, all they lacked was experience. Over time they also started to explore the ruins surrounding them. They found many useful things, among them they found a vault and inside were countless scrolls on different topics, gold, jewels and weapons, but the most unexpected but also most surprising find was the long-lost summoning contract of the Uzumaki clan. Kushina said she would let them sign the contract when they were older. They, of course, pouted at that and tried to use the dreaded puppy dog eyes no jutsu to get her to reconsider and let them sign it sooner. To their dismay, the jutsu was blocked by the feared stern parent stare no jutsu and they had to make a tactical retreat. Now and then they began to clear the ruins and started to rebuild some buildings. It was still a long way until the ruins would be completely cleared and rebuilt and even longer until it would be repopulated, if ever. About 20 months later, the adults decided they were ready for some first-hand experience in the outside world. The nearest village beside Konoha was a little fishing village in the Land of Waves. Fishing village in the Land of Waves. Naruto and Hinata were now both 11 years old, they completed most of their basic training and now needed to gain some real experience. So they went to the little fishing village together with Kushina and Hitomi. Once they arrived they saw something they didn't anticipate. The whole village was overrun with thugs and other lowlife criminals and mercenaries. In the marketplace was a large crowd and in the center was a fat little man with a cheap suit and a cane. He seemed to be the boss of all these thugs and mercenaries. In front of him was the dead body of a man with his head lying a few meters beside him. The execution must have happened shortly before they arrived since the blood was still fresh. The fat man barked some orders to his men and they began to leave, but they didn't leave alone, they had several women with them. All chained together, their age ranged from 5 to 40 and everything in between. The most sickening thing was that they obviously weren't just simple hostages, they were going to be sex slaves, and this fat slob seemed to have his eyes especially on the youngest ones of them. Naruto was about to storm forward, but his mother placed a hand on his shoulder to hold him back and when he looked at her, she shook her head with a sad look. As soon as the fat slob and his men were gone, a young woman ran over to the body of the dead man and broke down. Soon after an older man walked over to her side and placed a hand on her shoulder to console her while also shedding tears. Kushina decided they would have to help these people, first thing would be to help the ones who were obviously the family of the dead man. So they walked over to them and she asked, "I'm sorry for your loss, but what happened here?" The old man turned around to see who asked and when he saw them he said, "Gato happened, he ordered the execution of my son-in-law for giving us hope when he opposed him. Gato took our daughters and wives as payment, since we couldn't pay him for his protection Kaiza tried to barging with him for more time, but when that didn't work, he said that he wouldn't let him take them. Gato only laughed at that and ordered the execution." Kushina was furious when she heard that but managed to calm down enough to ask another question, "Where does this little piece of fat hide?" The old man was surprised that a stranger would show so much compassion for them. "I don't know who you are, though I am thankful for your compassion, you can't just simply go to Gato and try something rash. He has a whole army on his side and his hideout is a fortress. Don't worry about that, just tell us where," Hitomi chimed in with clear agitation in her voice. Since he couldn't stop them, he told them where they could find Gato. "I still don't know who you are and I'm afraid that regardless of if you manage to take him down, we can't pay you anything since we have nothing left," said the old man with a saddened face. "Don't worry about that, we don't expect you to pay anything, we just do what's right. I'm Uzumaki Kushina and this is my son Naruto," she told him with a smile while she nodded at him and Naruto waved in response. Next was Hitomi, "I'm Hyuga Hitomi, with my daughter Hinata," both smiled at the old man. The old man bowed his head to them and said, "I'm Tazuna and this over here is my daughter Tsunami. Before you go, could you help us with his burial?" Tazuna asked them while looking at his dead son-in-law. The group helped with bringing the dead body to a small hill with a lone tree on top where they buried Kaiza. After that was done they proceeded towards Gato's hideout. Tazuna wasn't exaggerating when he said it was a fortress and that the fat slob had a whole army for his protection. They scouted the area and the layout of the old fortress. Once that was done they made their attack plan. The plan was simple yet effective: wait until nighttime, sneak in during the shift change, Hitomi, Hinata, and Naruto would locate the prisoners and free them, while Kushina would deal with the fat slob himself. For how to get everyone out, Naruto would create a big enough distraction with his clones and seals, while Hitomi and Hinata would sneak the prisoners out. Once all the prisoners were safe, Naruto would have free reign and level the place, while Kushina made sure nobody slips out and Hitomi and Hinata brought everyone else safely back to the village. The night came quick and they began their attack. They slipped past the guards without any difficulties and once inside the building they split up like planned. Kushina made a beeline for the top section of the building, since that was the most probable location where Gato would have his personal quarters. On her way, she dodged most guards while others were put silently out of commission and out of sight. Once she found a heavily guarded and pretty sturdy door, she knew that would be where Gato was. With Hitomi's group. They passed numerous guards, most of them were drunk, which made it pretty easy for Naruto to simply hinge into a guard and ask one where the prisoners are so he could have some fun. In their drunken state, they were quick to answer their comrade and gave him directions and told him to have fun, but to better not touch the younger girls, since they were reserved for their boss. After getting all the information he needed he put the guards down and out of sight. He returned to his two teammates and told them where to go. They quickly reached their destination and killed all the prison guards. For the two children were these their first kills since until now they only incapacitated the guards. Naruto took it better than Hinata. He was pale, but he kept reminding himself that it was necessary, they were bad guys and he would have had to kill sooner or later anyway, that's the life of a shinobi. Hinata, on the other hand, was shaking, she puked and had tears in her eyes. Naruto saw that, went over to her and put his arms around her. He tells her in a calming voice the same things he told himself. This combined with a soothing embrace calmed Hinata down and after a few minutes they were ready to go on and free the prisoners. They searched the guards and found the keys for the prison, the cells, and the shackles they would be wearing. Inside the prison were no guards, only cells and the prisoners. They probably didn't think anybody would manage to get in there. So they quickly woke everyone up and told them to remain quiet and that they were there to free them. Everyone they saw at the marketplace was there and when they asked around if there were other prisoners they were told that there was only one other prisoner. When they reached the cell of this prisoner, they found a tall man lying on the floor unconscious. He wore grey cargo pants, tundra camo leg and arm warmers, had bandages wrapped around his mouth and a Kurigakure forehead protector. Hitomi instantly knew who this man was, what she didn't know was why he was here and why he was a prisoner. So to get some answers she woke him up with a simple water jutsu splashing in his face. Zabuza woke up with a startle and was instantly on guard. He was unconscious until now and woke up in a prison cell with shackles on his arms and legs and his weapons were nowhere in sight. When he looked up he saw a woman on the other side of the bars of his cell. He didn't know her, he hadn't seen her before, but when he saw her eyes he asked, "What is a Hyuga doing here?" "I think I would have noticed it if you were one of this fat pig's concubines, although I doubt he would ever take you as one, since you are too old for his taste. That girl over there, on the other hand, is exactly his type," he said with disgust. Hitomi was visibly agitated by that statement, Hinata was shivering, and Naruto's eyes flashed for a brief moment red with black slits instead of pupils. All that didn't go unnoticed by Zabuza, and he was wondering who they were and what they wanted. "Zabuza, the demon of the bloody mist, what is a member of the Seven Swordsmen doing here?" asked him Hitomi. He looked at her for a moment before he sighed and said, "I was looking for a job for my apprentice and me. I'm no longer a Kiri shinobi, not after what is currently happening there. We are on the run from their hunter nins, me because I'm a nuke nin and my apprentice because of his bloodline limit. Since one needs money to live, we had to look for jobs that would pay enough. Sadly there isn't that much of a job market for nuke nins." Hitomi was surprised to hear that, but she could tell that he was telling the truth. There was still one question unanswered, "But why are you then in this cell, and where is your apprentice since he isn't with the other prisoners?" "We didn't like the job we were offered so we refused, but apparently this fat pig doesn't like a no for an answer and slipped something in our drinks," Zabuza said with slight embarrassment that someone like Gato managed to drug him. But his embarrassment quickly vanished when he realized something: if his apprentice wasn't with the other prisoners, where was he? A very unpleasant thought came to his mind and he asked with a little bit of panic in his voice, "Are you sure he isn't with the others? He has very feminine looks and would easily pass as a young girl not much older than this blonde kid over there." Hitomi shook her head and said that she was certain that he wasn't there, which made Zabuza pale at the thought that his earlier assumption would be highly possible now. He quickly stood up and dashed towards the iron bars, but was just as quickly stopped by his shackles. With panic now clear all over his face and his voice he pleaded, "Please, you have to let me out of here. If Haku isn't here, that means that he's with Gato, and after this pig drugged us, he still thinks that Haku is a girl. I need to get to him and save him, so please let me out of here." Hitomi is once again surprised by Zabuza's reaction but could see any trace of a lie, so she grabbed the keys, opened the cell and his shackles to set him free. He quickly thanked her and was about to dash for the exit before she stopped him. "We have another comrade with us, she is currently on her way towards Gato to deal with him. If Haku is with him, she will save him, we are here to rescue these prisoners, Naruto over there will create a distraction for us to evacuate the prisoners and after that is done, he will level this fortress to the ground," she told him. Zabuza was skeptic at that, how could this kid level a fortress of this size all by himself? Hitomi saw his skeptic look and added with a smirk, "Trust me, he definitely has the means to do that and you definitely don't want to be in this place when he does." He slowly nodded at that, but was still not fully convinced and said, "I still have to get my weapons, and are you sure that your comrade will save Haku?" Hitomi activated her Byakugan and looked around to see what she was looking for. "She's actually already on her way to the rendezvous point, with a +1 I might add," she replied with a smile, and Zabuza was visibly relieved when he heard that. After all that they made their way out of the fortress, while making a little detour through the armory to get Zabuza's and Haku's weapons. With Kushina at the same time as the prisoners were freed. Kushina was looking at the guards in front of the door and decided to outmaneuver them by simply exiting through a window and sneak along the wall towards a window of Gato's room. Once there she looked inside if anybody else was inside beside Gato, she saw something that made her blood boil. Gato was currently completely naked and about to force himself onto a girl that was little older than Naruto. She was clearly drugged, gagged and bound to the bedposts, but had still all her clothes on until he started to rip them open. To his surprise, the girl in front of him was no girl, but actually a boy. At first, he was angry at that, but then he said it didn't matter and stripped the drugged boy of his pants. Gato was visibly irritated by the fact that this feminine boy was better packed than him, which wasn't all too difficult since he himself didn't have much down there, though that didn't mean that Haku wasn't generously gifted. Kushina decided this was the perfect moment to sneak in, she placed a silencing seal on the door and snuck behind Gato. Gato grabbed Haku's balls and squeezed them getting an anguished moan from Haku through the gag in his mouth. He was just about to penetrate Haku's rectum when he found that his balls were suddenly cut off. He let out a blood-curdling scream, but nobody seemed to hear him. As he grabbed his bleeding lower half where his balls once were attached to he heard a voice behind him, "You can scream all you want, nobody can hear you. But to your luck, I'm kind of on a tight schedule so I will end this quickly." This was the last he heard when he suddenly saw his own body upside down, realizing much too late that his head had been separated from his body. The pain and Gato's scream must have sobered Haku enough to finally take in the situation he was in. He was frightened at first when he saw Gato and what he was about to do, but he was quickly relieved when he saw this red-headed woman cutting off Gato's head. Kushina walked over to the bedposts where Haku was bound to and cut him loose. "Who are you? Are you fit enough to walk?" she asked him. He took out the gag and replied, "I'm Yuki Haku, thank you for saving me from this pig. And yes, I think I'm fit enough to walk on my own, but who are you?" While he asked her he quickly dressed as good as possible with his torn clothing. She smiled at him and said, "I'm Uzumaki Kushina, I'm here with a team to rescue the prisoners and kill Gato. Well, one of these objectives is now done, the rest of my team should be freeing the prisoners as we speak." She moved over to the window through which she came in and asked sheepishly, "You aren't by any chance a shinobi and can walk on vertical surfaces?" Haku chuckled at that and told her that he indeed just so happens to be a shinobi and he can walk on walls. So the two climbed out the window and Kushina led him to the rendezvous point where her team would be waiting for her. They arrived at the point and saw the rest of the team minus Naruto, who was about to begin his part of the plan. Just moments later there were multiple big explosions and the ground began to shake. After a few seconds, the shaking stopped and when they looked towards the fortress, they could see a blonde kid high up in the air with a red cloak surrounding him. In front of his face was a dark ball which he swallowed quickly after he created it. Only moments later he opened his mouth and out came a large dark beam of energy and when it hit the ground there was suddenly a large blinding dome and a second later a deafening boom could be heard and everyone was pushed to the ground by a large shockwave. When it was over after a few seconds, there was nothing left where the fortress once stood beside a huge crater. Moments later the blonde kid arrived at the meeting point slightly winded. Everyone besides his team was trying to pick up their jaws from the ground. Zabuza was suddenly very glad he took the advice from Hitomi and didn't stay in the fortress to look for Haku, he would have been dead, not even a little piece of him would have been left over. After regaining his wits he saw that Haku was also there, beside the red-headed woman, although he was worried when he saw his clothing being torn. "Haku, are you okay?" Did this fat pig? He asked him with concern. But to his relief, Haku shook his head when he answered, Zabuza-sama, I'm fine thanks to Kushina-sama, she saved me before he could do something. Zabuza was glad to hear that, but something clicked in his mind, Kushina, red hair, could she possibly be? But I thought she died years ago. So he asked, Kushina-sama, are you by any chance Uzumaki Kushina the Red Death? To his shock, she nodded with a devious smile and said, yes I am, and this blonde boy is my son Uzumaki Naruto, to which Naruto smiled shyly. From your shocked expression, I guess you expected me to be dead, well I'm not, and neither is my husband. Zabuza was confused, nobody knew that she was married, but it would make sense since she had a son. In the end, they all walked back together to the fishing village. Once back the village was overjoyed that their daughters and wives were back and unharmed. What made them all the happier was the fact that Gato and his army were no more. What made all the sweeter was that Naruto swiped the place clean during his little distraction, with the help of his shadow clones and a bunch of storage scrolls. The village threw a large party for their heroes where everyone enjoyed themselves. The morning after the party, Naruto's group and Zabuza and Haku were about to leave when Naruto had an idea. He talked a lot with Haku and Zabuza, so he learned about their situation and why they were in Gato's fortress. Hey, mom, can't Zabuza and Haku come with us? They are good people and they could use a place to stay, where they are safe from those hunter nins, and back at our place is more than enough room. Kushina thought about it and finally said, I don't see why not, you can come with us if you want, and like Naruto said we have more than enough room. Zabuza also thought about this offer, it would definitely provide safety, and Haku's pleading look made the decision clear. We will gladly accept your offer, but where exactly is it where we will be living? I don't see any headbands on you so it can't be one of the major villages. Kushina chuckled at that and replied, well, we aren't going to any of the major villages, we're going to Yuzu. This could currently be considered the safest place on the whole continent, she said with a smile. To say that Zabuza was surprised would be an understatement, but he saw the logic behind it. Everyone thinks that Yuzu is destroyed, which would be right, but at the same time, everyone knows that reaching Yuzu is akin to suicide because of the giant whirlpool surrounding the island. But since they had an Uzumaki with them they could safely reach the island and would, in turn, be saved from everyone else that might be hunting them. After about 4 hours of travel, they were finally back home in Yuzu. They led their new friends towards the city center where the Yuzu Tower stood and they were living for the past few years. They were greeted by Kami who smiled at them and said, I see you brought visitors back with you, who might they be? What if Kami and Shinigami make Naruto Sage of 6 Paths, and thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.